Welcome back to another dive into the shadows of Fazbear Entertainment, where tonight we're focusing our attention on one character in particular, a blue rabbit with a red guitar, who has haunted the franchise since its very beginning, appearing in more forms and variations than almost any other animatronic in the series. This is the story of Bonnie, the guitarist whose melody has echoed through abandoned pizzerias, horror attractions, and mega pizza complexes for over a decade now. From his humble beginnings on the show stage to his mysterious disappearance in the modern era, we'll trace every version of this character, every transformation, every secret hidden in the code and minigames that have made Bonnie one of the most iconic figures in horror gaming history. Before we begin our journey through the complete timeline of this enigmatic bunny, feel free to like and subscribe if you enjoy this kind of deep, immersive storytelling that unfolds like a dream. And let me know in the comments which version of Bonnie you find most unsettling, or if there's a particular mystery about this character that keeps you thinking long after the lights go out. Let's begin. The birth of a blue nightmare. In the beginning, there was darkness, and from that darkness emerged something that would become legendary in the world of horror gaming. When Scott Cawthon sat down to create the original Five Nights at Freddy's, responding to criticism that his previous work looked like scary animatronics, he leaned into that feedback with intentional purpose. And the very first character he designed for this new horror experience wasn't Freddy Fazbear himself. It was Bonnie the Rabbit. This detail alone tells you something about the importance of this character to the franchise's DNA. Bonnie wasn't an afterthought or a supporting player added to fill out a roster. He was the foundation, the first brick laid in what would become a cultural phenomenon. Scott Cawthon has openly stated in interviews that Bonnie is the animatronic he personally finds most frightening, and during the development of that first game, Bonnie gave him nightmares. Not the concept of the game, not the general idea of haunted animatronics, but specifically this blue rabbit with the vacant stare and the guitar clutched in mechanical fingers. There's something you should know about Bonnie from the start, something that Scott Cawthon himself confirmed, and that adds an extra layer of strangeness to this character. According to the creator, Bonnie does not abide by the laws of space, time, or physics. This isn't just flavor text or marketing speak. It's a fundamental aspect of how Bonnie was conceived and programmed. In the original game, Bonnie is known for his teleportation abilities, appearing and disappearing between cameras with an unsettling speed that defies the rules governing the other animatronics. He can be in the backstage one moment and the supply closet the next without passing through the connecting rooms. He seems to float slightly in certain images, his feet not quite touching the ground in the Celebrate poster that appears randomly in your office. These aren't glitches or oversights. They're intentional design choices that make Bonnie feel otherworldly, like he exists partially outside the normal rules of the game's reality. And that supernatural quality has persisted across every version of the character that followed, each one bringing its own unique form of dread. Now, before we go further, we need to address something that has confused fans since the very beginning. What color is Bonnie? If you ask most people, they'll say purple. The merchandise shows him as purple. Fan art depicts him as purple. For years, the community believed Bonnie was a purple rabbit, but Scott Cawthon himself confirmed that Bonnie is actually blue. The purple appearance in the original game is due to the lighting in the pizzeria, the way the dim, shadowy environment tints everything with that distinctive purple hue that became synonymous with death and darkness in the FNAF universe. The confusion was so widespread that even the movie's costume designer, Robert Bennett, initially made Bonnie purple. It wasn't until he consulted directly with Scott Cawthon that he learned the truth and corrected the design. Bonnie is blue, has always been blue, but the lighting conditions under which we encounter him transform that blue into something that looks purple, creating an optical illusion that became one of the franchise's most persistent misconceptions. This matters because it speaks to something deeper about Bonnie as a character. He's not what he appears to be. The lighting lies, the appearances deceive, and that theme of deception, of things not being what they seem, runs through every iteration of Bonnie like a dark thread connecting them all together. In the lore of Fazbear Entertainment, Bonnie was created as part of the original animatronic band, the performers who would entertain children at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. He was designed to be the guitarist, the cool member of the band, positioned stage left with his red electric guitar that would later need to be redesigned in subsequent games due to copyright issues with its distinctive flying V shape. He was paired with Freddy Fazbear as the bear's best friend, with Chica the chicken as the backup vocals, and with Foxy, the pirate fox, in his own separate show space. But Bonnie's history goes back even further than that first Freddy Fazbear's Pizza location. The evidence suggests he existed in some form before the main pizzeria opened, possibly as far back as the early 1980s when Fazbear Entertainment was first establishing itself. He was there, on that stage, playing that guitar, long before any of the tragedies that would define the franchise occurred. He was innocent once, just a machine designed to bring joy to children's birthday parties. That innocence wouldn't last. Classic Bonnie, the rabbit who started it all. Let's talk about Bonnie, as he appeared in the first 5 nights at Freddy's game, the version that became iconic, that defined what this character was and would be. When you start your first night as Mike Schmidt, the night guard whose real identity would become a subject of intense speculation and eventual revelation, Bonnie stands on the show stage alongside Freddy and Chica. 3 animatronics under the spotlight, frozen in performance poses, waiting for the clock to strike midnight. Bonnie is an indigo-colored animatronic rabbit, though as we've discussed, that color appears much more purple under the pizzeria's lighting. He has a guitar in his hands, red and distinctive, and a red bow tie to match. His design is relatively simple compared to what would come later in the franchise. He has no eyebrows, which gives him an unsettling, expressionless quality that makes it harder to read emotion or intent in his face. His eyes are magenta, bright and staring, with small pupils that seem to look through you rather than at you. His muzzle is white, as is the inside of his ears and his stomach, creating contrast with the darker blue of his body. The interesting thing about Bonnie's construction is that, aside from his head and left hand, most of his body is nearly identical to Freddy's. Same torso, same proportions, same basic structure. It's only the head, the distinctive rabbit features, and the hand presumably designed for playing guitar that truly differentiate them. This detail would become more significant in later games, but in the original, it simply speaks to the practical reality of animatronic design within Fazbear Entertainment. Why build a completely unique frame when you can use standardized parts and just change the cosmetic elements? But what really matters isn't what Bonnie looks like, it's how he behaves. According to the theme song that plays in the game, Bonnie has a personality based on a rock musician. He's boastful, prideful, with the speech pattern of a laid-back hippie stereotype. During the day, he's the cool guitarist, the one kids think is awesome because he looks like a rock star. But at night, something changes. The personality program gives way to something else, something darker. Bonnie is, without question, the most active animatronic in the first game. On most nights, he's the first one to leave the show stage. While Freddy often takes his time and Chica moves at her own pace, Bonnie is eager, almost impatient. He doesn't waste time. The moment midnight hits and the AI activates, Bonnie is moving, driven by something that makes him more aggressive, more persistent than his bandmates. Here's what typically happens. You're sitting in your office, checking cameras to track the animatronic's movements. You pull up camera 1 Alpha, the show stage, and you see all 3 of them standing there. You switch to another camera to check on Foxy or look at the bathrooms. When you switch back to the show stage, Bonnie is gone. Already. First night, first hour, and Bonnie has already begun his hunt. He moves through the left side of the building exclusively. Never the right. That's Chica's territory. Bonnie takes the west corridor, appearing in the dining area, sometimes stopping in the backstage, where an empty endoskeleton sits on a table that Bonnie curiously never pays any attention to, as if he knows it's not relevant, or perhaps remembers what it's like to be just a shell. From there, he might move to the supply closet, or head down the west hall, approaching the corner right outside your office. And here's where it gets interesting. When Bonnie reaches that west hall corner, when he's right outside your door, he stares directly into the camera. Not past it, not around it, directly at you. He knows you're watching. He's aware of the security system, aware that someone is on the other end of those camera feeds, and he doesn't care. In fact, he seems to be making a point of letting you know that he sees you seeing him. His movements are paranormally fast. He can appear at your door with shocking speed, faster than should be possible given the physical distance he needs to traverse. And when he's in that west hall outside your door, sometimes his head shakes violently, twitching back and forth in a way that's clearly not normal mechanical movement. It's aggressive, agitated. The sound that accompanies this movement is disturbing, a moaning, breathing sort of noise that suggests pain or rage, or something between the two. If you're not watching carefully, if you let your guard down for even a moment, Bonnie will appear in the left doorway of your office. You'll see him there when you lower the camera, a dark silhouette in the door frame, just standing there. And at that point, your only defense is to hit the door button and seal him out. You have to be quick. If you're too slow, or if you lift the camera again before he's left, you're done. He'll enter the office and wait. And the next time you lower that camera to check the rest of the building, Bonnie will be right there, filling your screen, and it's game over. His jump scare is brutal in its simplicity. No elaborate animation, no fancy movements. Just Bonnie's face lunging forward, mouth open, eyes bright, filling the screen completely. The sound is a harsh, distorted scream, and then static, then the game over screen. But what makes Bonnie truly unsettling isn't just his aggressive behavior or his jump scare. It's the implications. Because Bonnie, like all the animatronics in the first game, is possessed. There's a child spirit inside that shell, a victim of William Afton, the man who would become Springtrap, the man who used a Spring Bonnie costume to lure children to their deaths. Based on evidence gathered from across multiple games, particularly the arrangement of animatronic heads in the good ending of Five Nights at Freddy's 3, and the gravestone placement in Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria simulator, the child possessing Bonnie is named Jeremy, not to be confused with Jeremy Fitzgerald, the night guard from the second game, or Jeremy the victim of the bite of 87. This is a different Jeremy, one of the 5 children murdered in the missing children incident of 1985. This Jeremy is a victim, an innocent kid who went to a birthday party and never came home. William Afton lured him away from the safety of the party, away from his parents, with promises or tricks we can only imagine. And then Afton murdered him, stuffed his body into the Bonnie animatronic suit, where the supernatural properties of agony and remnant, concepts that would be explored more deeply in later games and the book series, allowed Jeremy's spirit to bind with the machine. The result is what we see in the game. Jeremy isn't trying to hurt you because he's evil or because he enjoys it. He's confused, trapped, existing in a state between life and death, with his perceptions warped by trauma and time. The animatronics, as Scott Cawthon has described them, have animalistic instincts now. They see adults, particularly security guards, as threats. They want to protect themselves, or they want revenge on the man who killed them, and in their confused state, they see every adult in a security uniform as potentially being that man. So when Bonnie hunts you through the pizzeria, when he stares into the camera with those bright magenta eyes, what you're really seeing is a murdered child acting on instinct and pain, unable to move on, unable to rest, trapped in an endless loop of protecting territory and attacking perceived threats. The tragedy of it is overwhelming when you really think about it. Bonnie isn't a monster. He's a victim who became monstrous through no choice of his own. And that's true of all the main animatronics in the first game. But Bonnie, being the most active, being the one who moves first and strikes fastest, becomes the face of that tragedy more than almost any other character. There's also the matter of Bonnie's apparent supernatural abilities. That teleportation we mentioned earlier, the way he seems to break the rules of space and time. Some of this can be explained by game mechanics, the need to create challenge and unpredictability. But within the lore, within the story being told, these abilities suggest something about the nature of the spirits possessing these machines. They're not bound completely by physical laws. They can manipulate reality to some degree, bend the rules, exist in ways that shouldn't be possible. In the FNAF universe, remnant and agony are substances, spiritual energies that can be extracted, melted, injected, combined. They give the dead a hold on the physical world, allow spirits to persist in metal and circuitry. Bonnie's strange movements, his teleportation, his floating in that one image. All of this suggests a spirit that has partially mastered the animatronic form it inhabits, that can push the boundaries of what should be possible. This makes Bonnie dangerous in a way that goes beyond simply being an aggressive animatronic. He's unpredictable. You can't always track his movements logically. Sometimes he'll be where he shouldn't be, appear when he shouldn't appear. And that uncertainty, that violation of expected patterns, is what makes him so effective as a horror element. Players of the first game will tell you that Bonnie is usually the first animatronic to get them. Not Freddy with his iconic status, not Foxy with his sprint down the hallway. Bonnie, because Bonnie doesn't give you time to learn. He's on you from the first night, testing your reflexes, your awareness, your ability to manage multiple threats simultaneously. He forces you to master the mechanics or die trying. And even after you beat the game, even after you've survived all 7 nights, including the infamous Night 7 custom challenges, Bonnie remains threatening. In the custom night mode, you can set his AI to maximum difficulty, level 20, making him impossibly fast and aggressive. At that level, Bonnie becomes less like an animatronic and more like a force of nature, an unstoppable presence that demands constant vigilance. The original Bonnie established everything that makes this character iconic. The aggressive behavior, the supernatural elements, the tragic backstory, the visual design that's simple but effective. Every version of Bonnie that would follow, every iteration and variant, would build on this foundation. But the classic Bonnie remains special because he was first. He was the one that scared Scott Cawthon in his own nightmares. He was the one that made players understand what Five Nights at Freddy's was really about. Not jump scares for their own sake, but jump scares backed by lore, by tragedy, by a story that made you feel something other than just fear. When you see that silhouette in the left doorway, when you hear that breathing, moaning sound, when you scramble to hit the door button before it's too late, you're not just playing a game. You're participating in a ghost story. And Bonnie, the blue rabbit with the red guitar who doesn't obey the laws of physics, is one of the ghosts. Withered Bonnie, the face of decay. If the original Bonnie represented the beginning of the horror, the establishment of the formula, then Withered Bonnie represents the franchise's willingness to push boundaries, to make something already frightening into something absolutely nightmarish. When Five Nights at Freddy's 2 was released, players expecting more of the same were instead confronted with something that redefined what these games could show, what they could do to create genuine discomfort. Withered Bonnie is, without exaggeration, one of the most disturbing character designs in the entire Five Nights at Freddy's franchise. And that's saying something in a series known for nightmare fuel. Let's set the scene. Five Nights at Freddy's 2 is actually a prequel to the first game, taking place in 1987, before the events of the original. The player takes on the role of Jeremy Fitzgerald, a night guard at a new and improved Freddy Fazbear's Pizza location. This pizzeria has new animatronics, the toy versions of the classic characters, designed to be more kid-friendly with facial recognition software and bright colors. But in the back room, in parts and service, the old animatronics from the previous location have been brought in. The original Freddy, the original Chica, the original Foxy, and the original Bonnie, only they're not in good shape. According to Phone Guy's messages, the company tried to retrofit them with new technology, tried to bring them up to modern standards, but they were deemed too ugly, and apparently they smell bad, a detail that takes on horrifying significance when you remember these suits contained the decomposing bodies of murdered children. So the withered animatronics, as they came to be known, were left in parts and service, supposedly deactivated, supposedly harmless, kept around only for spare parts to use in the new toy animatronics. But of course, they're not actually deactivated, because the spirits inside them never sleep. Withered Bonnie is a disaster of an animatronic. His suit is a dark, dirty blue, covered in tears and holes that expose the endoskeleton beneath. His left arm is completely missing from below the shoulder, with a mass of wires dangling from the socket, like artificial entrails. The fabric covering on his right hand and left foot is gone, revealing bare metal endoskeleton. His torso is thinner than Freddy's, with an H-shaped belly and a dark red bow tie. 2 small black buttons sit below the bow tie, details that were added during the attempted retrofit. But the real horror of Withered Bonnie is his face, or rather, the absence of it. His entire face is missing. The suit covering that should be there has been completely removed, leaving only the lower jaw intact. What you see instead is a dark cavity, a void where a face should be, filled with dangling wires and the suggestion of mechanical components in the shadows. The endoskeleton's head is barely visible in that darkness, with 2 pinpricks of red light where the eyes should be. These aren't normal animatronic eyes. There's something else, something that glows from within the emptiness. The bottom jaw remains, featuring thin, round teeth, more than the original Bonnie had in the first game. And that jaw is functional, moving during Withered Bonnie's jump scare to reveal that the endoskeleton beneath can still animate, still bite, still pose a threat despite the massive damage to the outer shell. Withered Bonnie's right ear is usually folded forward, adding to his disheveled appearance. He seems to lean permanently to one side, as if his internal structure is damaged and can't fully support his weight. He's falling apart basically, but he's still active, still dangerous, still, and in some ways, more frightening because of the damage rather than despite it. The question that haunts players and lore enthusiasts is simple. What happened to Bonnie's face? Phone Guy mentions the attempted retrofit, the installation of new technology, which provides our main clue. Based on this information, we can infer that during the retrofit process, something went wrong with the facial mechanisms. Whether technicians accidentally damaged the face covering while trying to install new technology, or whether there was a mechanical failure during testing, the end result left Bonnie's face completely removed. The smell Phone Guy mentions could suggest decomposition from the child's body inside, though the game never explicitly confirms why the face specifically was removed, rather than just being damaged like the other withered animatronics. What we know for certain is that by the time we encounter him in FNAF 2, the damage is severe and irreparable. But what we do know is that Withered Bonnie's appearance serves a purpose in the story. He's a visual representation of decay, of time taking its toll, of the inability to escape the past. The original Bonnie was already haunted, already tragic. Withered Bonnie takes that tragedy and multiplies it, showing what happens when years pass and the spirits don't find rest, when the machines literally fall apart around them and they still can't move on. In terms of gameplay, Withered Bonnie is incredibly active. He starts in parts and service alongside the other withered animatronics, but he's always the first to leave. Not sometimes, not usually. Always. He's more aggressive than Withered Chica, more persistent. He'll leave that back room as early as 12 a.m., right at the start of the night, and begin making his way toward your office. His path takes him through the main areas of the pizzeria. He'll appear in the main hall, staring down the corridor. Then he moves to the hallway outside the office, getting closer. Eventually, he reaches Party Room 1, and from there, he climbs into the left air vent, bypassing the hallway entirely to come at you from an unexpected angle. The vents are a new mechanic in FNAF 2, and they're terrifying because you can't see into them until the animatronic is right there. By the time you see Withered Bonnie in the vent, he's already nearly at your office. Your only defense is to pull down the Freddy Fazbear mask, the hollow head that supposedly tricks the animatronics into thinking you're one of them. When Withered Bonnie enters your office, you'll hear his presence before you see him. Heavy footsteps, the sound of metal on tile, and then, when you lower the monitor, there he is, standing in your office, that faceless horror, just staring at you with those red pinprick lights burning in the darkness where his eyes should be. The office lights flicker. There's visual distortion, static around the edges of your vision, and you have to put that mask on immediately or you're dead. Even with the mask on, there's a moment of tension. He doesn't leave right away. He stands there, evaluating his programming or perhaps the spirit inside him, trying to determine if you're really an animatronic or if this is a trick. After a few seconds that feel like an eternity, he turns and leaves, climbing back into the vents or moving back through the pizzeria, giving you a temporary reprieve before the next attack. Withered Bonnie's jump scare is particularly brutal. When he gets you, his face, or what remains of it, lunges forward, that lower jaw opening wide, those red eyes flaring bright. The sound is distorted, wrong, like a scream filtered through broken machinery. It's visceral in a way that the original Bonnie's jump scare wasn't, because you're not just seeing an animatronic attack, you're seeing something that's barely holding together, something that should not be capable of movement, somehow still coming at you with malicious intent. What makes Withered Bonnie even more disturbing is how he's characterized in later games, particularly Ultimate Custom Night. In that game, which we'll discuss more later, Withered Bonnie has voice lines, and he's aware. He knows his face is missing. He makes puns about it. "I assure you, I am very real," he says, his voice damaged and glitchy, with an ominous buzzing in the background. "Let's see how long you can survive in my world. Where did the others go? How'd I get here? What is this place?" His confusion is palpable, the disorientation of a spirit that doesn't understand its own existence. And then, the kicker. "What is that? Your own face? Let me put that on for you. Actually, why don't I put mine on first?" He's making a face pun. He's aware that he's damaged, aware that his face is gone, and he's using that knowledge to taunt you. It's dark humor born from trauma, a coping mechanism for a spirit trapped in a nightmare. "You blinked," he says elsewhere, which is chilling when you remember that Withered Bonnie doesn't have eyelids. He can't blink. The lack of eyelids is something he's conscious of, another piece of his damage that he's incorporated into his identity. This characterization adds layers to Withered Bonnie. He's not just a scary animatronic. He's a person, or what remains of one, dealing with horrific circumstances by making jokes. The humor doesn't make him less frightening. If anything, it makes him more unsettling, because it highlights the human consciousness still present inside the machine, still aware despite everything. The decay of Withered Bonnie is also symbolic of the state of Fazbear Entertainment at this point in the timeline. The company is trying to move forward, trying to create new, better animatronics and leave the past behind. But the past won't stay buried. The withered animatronics, these broken, haunted machines, keep coming back, keep causing problems, because the sins of the company, the murders committed using their characters as cover, haven't been atoned for. You can replace the animatronics, you can build new ones, but you can't replace the children who died. You can't fix what William Afton broke. And so, the old animatronics persist, a constant reminder of the horror that happened, refusing to be discarded or forgotten. Withered Bonnie, more than any of his companions, embodies this refusal. He's the most damaged, the most obviously broken, but he's also the most active, the first to move. He won't be ignored. He won't stay in that back room where they put him. He demands attention, demands acknowledgement, demands that someone, anyone, remember what happened and recognize that the spirits trapped in these machines deserve justice, or at least peace. The tragedy is that Withered Bonnie doesn't get peace in FNAF 2. The location closes after the infamous bite of 87, and the toy animatronics are scrapped. But the withered animatronics, damaged as they are, survive. They're taken away, presumably stored somewhere, waiting, because in the FNAF timeline, FNAF 2 is actually before FNAF 1. These withered animatronics will be refurbished, their broken shells repaired, and they'll become the classic animatronics we saw in the first game. Which means Withered Bonnie's fate is to be rebuilt, to have his face restored, to become classic Bonnie again. He gets a second chance, in a sense, but that second chance is just another cycle of the same horror, another pizzeria, another night guard to hunt. Nothing really changes. Jeremy's spirit is still trapped. The nightmare continues. And maybe that's the real horror of Withered Bonnie. Not his appearance, as disturbing as it is. Not his aggressive behavior or his creepy voice lines. But the fact that he represents a cycle that can't be broken. Damage that can't be repaired. Trauma that persists no matter how many times you try to rebuild or move forward. He's the physical manifestation of the idea that some things can't be fixed, can only be endured. When players first encountered Withered Bonnie in FNAF 2, the reaction was immediate and visceral. This was too far. This was too scary. The missing face, the red eyes glowing in that darkness, the sheer wrongness of it all. It pushed the boundaries of what people expected from a jump-scare game, moved into territory that was genuinely disturbing rather than just startling. And in doing so, Withered Bonnie secured his place as one of the most memorable and iconic designs in the entire franchise. A character who proves that sometimes less is more, that taking something away, removing a face and leaving only void can be more frightening than any monster you could create. Withered Bonnie is decay given form. He's the past refusing to die. He's a murdered child who can't move on, trapped in a machine that's falling apart around him. And he's one of the purest distillations of what Five Nights at Freddy's is really about beneath all the jump scares and mechanics. Loss, trauma, the inability to escape, history, the persistence of the dead. Toy Bonnie, a new generation, same old haunting. After discussing the nightmare that is Withered Bonnie, we need to talk about his replacement, his supposedly improved successor, the animatronic that Fazbear Entertainment hoped would help them leave the past behind and create a brighter future for their brand. We need to talk about Toy Bonnie. In the lore of Five Nights at Freddy's 2, Fazbear Entertainment decided to completely redesign their animatronic cast. The old characters, the withered versions, were too damaged, too problematic, and frankly too haunted for the company to want to keep using them. So they created the toy animatronics, a new generation built from scratch with modern technology and a kid-friendly aesthetic designed to appeal to a new era of children. Toy Bonnie is the result of that redesign, and visually, he's completely different from the original Bonnie in almost every way. Where classic Bonnie is blue with a somewhat simple, utilitarian design, Toy Bonnie is a bright, shiny blue, almost cyan, with a much more polished appearance. His colors are more vibrant, more eye-catching. His face is rounder, softer, with prominent rosy red cheeks that give him a friendlier appearance. He has eyebrows, something the original Bonnie notably lacked, and these eyebrows are expressive, giving him a wider range of apparent emotion. His eyes are green, a bright, almost luminescent green that seems to glow in the dark. His eyelids are visible, painted a light blue, giving him a cartoonish quality. He has two prominent buck teeth in his upper jaw, much like a real rabbit, which makes him look less threatening during the day when he's just a performer. Toy Bonnie's body is sleeker, more modern. He still has the white muzzle, stomach, and inner ears, maintaining that color scheme from the original. But his limbs are more proportional, less chunky. He wears a red bow tie like the original, but everything about him is cleaner, more refined, more intentionally designed to be appealing rather than just functional. In terms of personality, at least during the day, Toy Bonnie is characterized as friendlier and more approachable than his predecessor. He's part of a new era, after all, designed to make children feel safe and happy. The toy animatronics all have facial recognition software linked to a criminal database, a safety feature that's supposed to prevent anyone dangerous from getting near the kids. It's a good idea in theory, showing that the company learned something from past incidents. But at night, that friendly personality evaporates. Like all the animatronics in the second game, Toy Bonnie becomes aggressive when the pizzeria is closed. The facial recognition software, which should identify you as an employee and leave you alone, instead seems to mark you as a threat. Perhaps it's malfunctioning, or perhaps it's something more supernatural, the hint of a possession that overrides the programming. Because yes, Toy Bonnie is possessed. During the events of FNAF 2, William Afton, still using a Spring Bonnie costume as a disguise, manages to infiltrate the new pizzeria and murder another set of children. Phone Guy's messages mention that someone used one of the suits, and that after that, the animatronics started acting strange. The Save the minigame shows the aftermath. 5 bodies scattered throughout the pizzeria, with the puppet trying and failing to reach them in time. These new victim spirits inhabit the toy animatronics, giving them the same supernatural aggression that the original animatronics displayed. Toy Bonnie, despite being a completely new machine with no connection to Jeremy or the original murders, becomes haunted by a new victim, carrying forward the cycle of violence and possession that defines Fazbear Entertainment. In gameplay terms, Toy Bonnie behaves differently from the original. He doesn't have a fixed path through the building. Instead, he can appear in multiple locations, sometimes in the main hall, sometimes in the prize corner, sometimes directly in the vents. His movement pattern is less predictable, which makes him more challenging to track. When he reaches your office, the mechanic for dealing with him is the same as Withered Bonnie. You put on the Freddy mask and wait for him to leave, but there's something unnerving about having both Toy Bonnie and Withered Bonnie in the same game, about seeing the new version and the old version side by side and realizing that despite the complete redesign, despite the new technology and the bright colors, nothing has really changed. The toy animatronics are still haunted. They're still dangerous. Fazbear Entertainment can't escape its past by simply building new robots and pretending the old ones never existed. The horror persists, finds new forms, new vessels. Toy Bonnie is proof that you can't solve a spiritual problem with a technological solution. What's particularly interesting about Toy Bonnie from a design perspective is how his appearance influenced later interpretations of the character. When artists draw Bonnie, they often pull elements from both classic Bonnie and Toy Bonnie, blending the two designs. The rosy cheeks became a standard feature in fan art. The eyebrows made their way into various interpretations. Even Glamrock Bonnie, who we'll discuss later, clearly takes inspiration from Toy Bonnie's more polished, modern aesthetic. Toy Bonnie also established a pattern that would continue throughout the franchise. The idea that each new location, each new iteration of Fazbear Entertainment would try to rebrand, to create new animatronics and put a fresh coat of paint over the bloodstains. But no matter how many times they try, the same tragedy unfolds. New characters, same hauntings, different shells, identical suffering. The fate of Toy Bonnie is particularly tragic. After the bite of 87, which may or may not have involved one of the toy animatronics, the decision was made to scrap the entire toy line. They were too aggressive, too unpredictable. The facial recognition software hadn't prevented the violence. If anything, the toys had become more dangerous than the originals. So Toy Bonnie, along with Toy Freddy, Toy Chica, and the others, was dismantled, taken apart, destroyed. The spirit inside, the child who had been murdered and bound to this machine, was freed. Or at least, that's the hope. The FNAF timeline suggests that the spirits did escape when the animatronics were destroyed, finally able to move on. But that freedom came at the cost of existence. Toy Bonnie was only operational for a short time, maybe a few months, before being scrapped. He barely got to exist before being destroyed. And the child inside him, already murdered once, had to experience the trauma of having their spiritual prison torn apart before they could find peace. It's a sad ending for a character that was supposed to represent a fresh start, a new beginning. Toy Bonnie was meant to be proof that Fazbear Entertainment could learn from its mistakes and create something better. Instead, he became proof that some cycles can't be broken, that some companies are so fundamentally cursed that no amount of redesign or rebranding can save them. In later games, Toy Bonnie makes appearances as a playable character in FNAF World, where he's much cuter and more innocent, divorced from the horror context. He appears in Help Wanted as well, a VR recreation of the original game's experience. But in the main timeline, in the story that matters, Toy Bonnie exists for a brief moment, and then is gone, scrapped and forgotten, except by the players who remember what he represented. What he represented was hope. The hope that things could be different. The hope that a new generation of animatronics could succeed where the old ones failed. The hope that maybe, just maybe, Fazbear Entertainment could put the murders and the hauntings behind them and actually become what they claim to be. A place where kids could have fun and be safe. That hope died with Toy Bonnie, scrapped along with his endoskeleton. Because in the Five Nights at Freddy's universe, hope is a luxury that the dead can't afford, and Fazbear Entertainment is a company built on foundations too bloody to ever be truly clean. Shadow Bonnie. The dark reflection. Now we venture into territory that's more abstract, more mysterious, dealing with an entity that doesn't fit neatly into the categories of haunted, animatronic, or possessed machine. We're talking about Shadow Bonnie, the dark counterpart, the glitch in reality, the character whose very name is impossible to pronounce correctly. Shadow Bonnie's official designation in the game files is RWQFSFASXC. Go ahead, try to pronounce that. The community settled on calling him RXQ for short, or just Shadow Bonnie, because referring to him by his full name is an exercise in tongue-twisting futility. Even the game acknowledges this. In FNAF World, Shadow Bonnie's loading screen message is simply, "Say my name." It's a joke, a recognition that this character's identity is intentionally obscure, intentionally difficult to grasp. Shadow Bonnie first appears in Five Nights at Freddy's 2, and his appearance is rare, random, and deeply unsettling. With approximately a 1 in 16,000 chance, though the game's random number generation makes this figure somewhat imprecise, the player might encounter a pitch-black silhouette in the left corner of their office. It looks like Toy Bonnie, has the same basic shape and proportions, but it's completely black, just a shadow, with only the eyes and teeth visible as glowing white features in the darkness. If you see Shadow Bonnie, if you stare at him for too long, the game crashes. Not a jump scare, not a game over screen. The game itself crashes hard, forcing you back to your desktop or home screen. It's a violation of the expected rules, a breaking of the fourth wall that suggests Shadow Bonnie exists on a different level from the other animatronics. He's not just in the game. He's affecting the game, corrupting the code, making reality unstable. On mobile versions, the game freezes instead of crashing, which is somehow even creepier. You're stuck there, locked in that moment of encounter with this shadow entity, unable to do anything until you force close the application yourself. So what is Shadow Bonnie? The answer depends on which source you consult and which interpretation of the law you accept, as the games themselves provide limited direct explanation. According to the Fazbear Frights books, which exist in an alternate continuity but often parallel the main series mechanics, Shadow Bonnie and his counterpart Shadow Freddy are made of something called Dark Remnant, where normal remnant is the spiritual energy that allows possession and supernatural events. Dark Remnant represents a form born from negative emotions and agony, potentially creating entities without being bound to a specific human soul. However, it's important to note that Fazbear Frights operates in its own timeline, and whether these exact mechanics apply to the game universe remains unconfirmed, though many in the community draw parallels. One popular interpretation suggests that Shadow Bonnie isn't possessed by a murdered child like the regular animatronics, but rather represents an entity created from accumulated trauma that permeates Fazbear Entertainment's locations. The agony itself given form, taking the shape of Toy Bonnie as a dark reflection. Another theory, also unconfirmed, but supported by some fans, suggests Shadow Bonnie might be connected to an employee who died in a springlock failure. The FNAF 4 minigames show employees helping someone into a springlock suit, with ominous warnings about moisture and sudden movements. If springlock failures were more common than officially reported, the death of someone wearing a spring Bonnie suit could have left behind enough spiritual energy to manifest as this shadow entity. This theory has support in the fact that Shadow Bonnie often appears in the context of freeing souls or helping the dead move on. In Five Nights at Freddy's 3, Shadow Bonnie plays a crucial role in the secret minigames. He appears in the Stage 01 minigame, a glitched, abstract level that requires specific actions to access. In this minigame, Shadow Bonnie leads you to a location where you can give cake to a crying child, allowing that child's spirit to finally find peace. This is significant because it suggests Shadow Bonnie, unlike Shadow Freddy, who seems to work with William Afton, has benevolent intentions. He wants to help. He wants the children's souls to be freed. This makes him a unique entity in the FNAF universe, a dark creature that nonetheless serves a good purpose, using his connection to death and agony to guide the lost spirits toward rest. In FNAF World, Shadow Bonnie is a playable character with support-focused abilities. He can buff teammates, stun enemies, and revive fallen party members. His role is explicitly that of a helper, a supporter, which reinforces the idea that despite his frightening appearance and his association with darkness, Shadow Bonnie is not malevolent. Then there's his appearance in Five Nights at Freddy's AR, Special Delivery, which adds another layer to his nature. In this game, Shadow Bonnie manifests when the player collects too much Dark Remnant. He's attracted to it, drawn to the accumulation of this negative spiritual energy. When he appears, you have to shine your flashlight on him repeatedly to make him retreat. If you don't, he'll jump scare you. One of the few times in the series when Shadow Bonnie actually attacks, rather than just observing or helping. This mechanic in Special Delivery suggests that Shadow Bonnie serves a purpose in the spiritual ecosystem of the FNAF universe. He's a collector, a regulator, preventing any one person or place from accumulating too much dark remnant. When it builds up, he appears to reclaim it, to prevent it from being misused or causing harm. He's like a dark antibody, part of the universe's immune system against spiritual corruption. The relationship between Shadow Bonnie and Toy Bonnie is worth examining as well. Shadow Bonnie takes the form of Toy Bonnie specifically, not Classic Bonnie or any other version. This might be because Toy Bonnie represents innocence and modernization, the hope for something better, and Shadow Bonnie is the dark corruption of that hope. Or it might be because the FNAF 2 location, where both Toy Bonnie and Shadow Bonnie appear, was a nexus of particularly intense suffering, with 2 sets of murders occurring there, creating enough agony to birth or attract a shadow entity. In Ultimate Custom Night, Shadow Bonnie returns as a secret character who can be randomly summoned by DD or XOR. When he appears, he darkens the entire office, making it nearly impossible to see. This isn't an attack exactly. It's more like Shadow Bonnie's presence warps reality, dims the light, brings shadow and obscurity wherever he goes. Eventually, he fades away on his own, and the light returns. But while he's there, you're operating in his world, subject to his rules. What makes Shadow Bonnie particularly fascinating from a lore perspective is that he exists in multiple timelines and locations without clear explanation. He appears in FNAF 2, which takes place in 1987. He appears in FNAF 3's minigames, which are set in the past, possibly the 80s or early 90s. He appears in Ultimate Custom Night, which may be a nightmare, a purgatory, or something else entirely. And he appears in AR, Special Delivery in the Modern Era. This suggests that Shadow Bonnie isn't bound by time in the way the regular animatronics are. He exists outside normal causality, able to manifest wherever dark remnant accumulates or wherever lost souls need guidance. He's a constant in the FNAF universe, a dark figure who appears again and again across decades and locations, always recognizable by his black silhouette and white eyes. The fact that Shadow Bonnie can crash your game, can affect the program itself, also implies that he might exist on a meta level, aware of the game as a game, or at least possessing power that extends beyond the fiction into the real-world interface between player and program. He's a character who breaks immersion by design, reminding you that you're playing a game and that the game itself might be haunted in some metaphorical or literal sense. Scott Cawthon has confirmed that Shadow Bonnie doesn't follow normal rules, much like he said about regular Bonnie. But with Shadow Bonnie, that rule breaking goes even further. He's not just teleporting or moving in unexpected ways. He's corrupting, crashing, darkening. He's a glitch that's somehow also a character, a bug that's also a feature, a mistake in the code that developed sentience and purpose. In discussions of FNAF lore, Shadow Bonnie often gets overlooked because he's rare, because his appearances are brief, because he doesn't fit into the main narrative in obvious ways. But he's important. He represents the idea that the darkness in this universe isn't just from William Afton's actions. It's bigger than that. It's a fundamental part of the reality these characters inhabit. Suffering and agony have power. They create things. And sometimes those things, like Shadow Bonnie, take on a life of their own. Whether you interpret him as the ghost of a Springlock victim, as an entity made of dark remnant, as a helper spirit guiding children to peace, or as some combination of all these things, Shadow Bonnie remains one of the most enigmatic characters in the franchise. He's a mystery wrapped in shadow, a presence felt more than understood, a character whose true nature might never be fully explained, because some things are more powerful when they remain unknown. And maybe that's fitting. Maybe Shadow Bonnie, the character with the unpronounceable name, should remain indefinable, existing in the spaces between what we know and what we can only guess at, a dark reflection that shows us truths we'd rather not see, about the nature of the FNAF universe and the persistence of suffering within it. Spring Bonnie, the yellow rabbit, and the seeds of Springtrap. Before we can fully understand Springtrap, before we can grasp the horror of what William Afton became, we need to talk about Spring Bonnie. Not Shadow Bonnie, not Toy Bonnie, not any of the variations and echoes, but the original Spring Bonnie, the Springlock suit that predates all the others, the costume that would become a tomb. Spring Bonnie exists at the beginning of everything, at the founding of Fazbear Entertainment, and perhaps even before that. The timeline is murky, but evidence suggests that Spring Bonnie, along with Fredbear, was one of the original mascots of Fredbear's family diner, the precursor to Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. This would place Spring Bonnie's creation in the late 1970s or early 1980s, making him one of the oldest characters in the entire franchise. Spring Bonnie was a yellow rabbit animatronic, bright and cheerful in appearance, designed to entertain children alongside Fredbear, the golden bear who would later become associated with Golden Freddy. The key thing about Spring Bonnie was that he was a springlock suit, a revolutionary design that allowed the animatronic to function in two modes. In animatronic mode, Spring Bonnie was a fully autonomous performer, capable of moving and entertaining on his own, with internal mechanisms handling all the movement. But the Springlock technology allowed those mechanisms to be compressed, locked into place, creating space inside the suit for a human performer to wear it. This dual functionality made Springlock suits incredibly valuable for Fazbear Entertainment, allowing them to use the same character as both an animatronic and a wearable costume, saving money and increasing flexibility. But Springlock suits were also incredibly dangerous. The mechanism worked through a series of locks and springs that held the internal components in a compressed state when the suit was in wearable mode. These locks had to be carefully wound and maintained. Phone Guy's training tapes, heard in various games, emphasize repeatedly that moisture and sudden movements can cause the locks to fail. If that happens, if even one lock loosens, it creates a chain reaction. The compressed animatronic parts, held under tension by the springs, snap back to their normal positions with extreme force. If someone is wearing the suit when this happens, they're crushed from the inside. The metal components, the crossbeams and gears and endoskeleton parts, all expanding back outward simultaneously, pierce through flesh and bone. It's a slow death, excruciating, as the person inside is essentially impaled by dozens of metal spikes while being compressed by the suit's outer shell. Blood loss, internal trauma, punctured organs, all of it happening at once while trapped inside what was supposed to be a fun costume. Fazbear Entertainment knew about this risk. The training tapes make that clear. They warned employees, told them to be careful, to check the locks before putting on a suit, to avoid the suits if it was raining or if they were sweating. But they kept using the Springlock suits anyway, because the cost savings and operational benefits outweighed, in their calculation, the risk to human life. Multiple Springlock failures occurred. Phone Guy mentions simultaneous failures at a sister location, an incident that led to Springlock suits being temporarily deemed unsafe for employee use. But the suits weren't destroyed. They were just moved to storage, sealed in the safe rooms, the hidden maintenance areas that weren't on the digital maps and weren't accessible to the regular animatronics. Spring Bonnie, the specific suit that would become Springtrap, ended up in one of these safe rooms, stored but not destroyed, still wearable despite the danger, just waiting for someone foolish or desperate enough to put him on. That someone was William Afton. William Afton, one of the co-founders of Fazbear Entertainment, the business partner of Henry Emily, was also a serial killer. He murdered children using his position in the company and his access to the animatronics to lure victims away from safety, and he used Spring Bonnie as his disguise. This is a crucial detail. William Afton specifically chose Spring Bonnie as his killing costume. Not Fredbear, not any other character. Spring Bonnie. The yellow rabbit became synonymous with death, with false promises and betrayal. Children trusted Spring Bonnie because he was supposed to be friendly, supposed to be safe, and William Afton exploited that trust, using the costume to get close to his victims before murdering them. The Fruity Maze minigame in Pizzeria Simulator shows this explicitly. A girl named Susie is playing an arcade game when Spring Bonnie appears behind her, looming. The text suggests Afton is telling her that he's found her dog, that her pet is alive and waiting for her. It's a lie, a manipulation. Her dog is dead. But Afton uses the promise of seeing her pet again to lure Susie away from the public areas of the pizzeria, and once she's isolated, he kills her. This pattern repeats. Afton in the Spring Bonnie suit, approaching children, offering them something, ice cream or a promise, or just the reassurance of a familiar character, and then leading them to the safe room where he can murder them without witnesses. During what became known as the Missing Children incident, which occurred in the mid-1980s based on various timeline clues throughout the series, Afton claimed at least 5 victims: Gabriel, Jeremy, Susie, Fritz, and Cassidy. All of them lured by Spring Bonnie, all of them killed by William Afton. The use of Spring Bonnie for these murders is particularly twisted because it corrupts the very idea of what the character was supposed to represent. Spring Bonnie was meant to bring joy. He was an entertainer, a friend to children, and Afton turned him into the face of their deaths. He weaponized innocence, turned trust into a trap. After the murders, after the spirits of the children inhabited the animatronics and began their haunting, William Afton eventually faced justice of a sort. Not legal justice, the authorities never caught him, but spiritual justice. In Five Nights at Freddy's 3, we see in the hidden minigames that Afton returns to the abandoned Freddy Fazbear's Pizza location years later, possibly to destroy the animatronics and free himself from the haunting, or possibly for some other purpose we don't fully understand. He dismantles the animatronics one by one, tearing them apart, scattering their pieces. But this act releases the spirits inside, and they manifest as ghostly apparitions, the forms of children, and they pursue Afton through the decrepit pizzeria. Terrified, Afton runs, seeking shelter, seeking escape from the vengeance of his victims. And he runs to the safe room, the one place the ghosts shouldn't be able to follow, because the animatronics programming prevents them from perceiving that space. In the safe room, Spring Bonnie waits, the same suit he used for his murders, now dusty and damaged from years of storage, but still technically wearable. In a moment of panic and perhaps twisted nostalgia, Afton puts on the Spring Bonnie suit. It worked before. It protected him before. The suit was his tool, his weapon. Maybe it can save him again. The children's spirits stop at the entrance to the safe room, unable or unwilling to enter. Afton, inside the Spring Bonnie suit, laughs at them. He mocks them. He thinks he's won, thinks he's safe. Then it starts to rain. Or rather, the ceiling leaks. Water drips down from the decaying roof. Droplets landing on the Spring Bonnie suit. Moisture, the one thing the training tapes warned about. The thing that can cause the spring locks to fail. And they do fail. One lock, then another, then all of them in rapid succession. The suit that was William Afton's shield becomes his prison and his torture device. The spring locks snap open, and the compressed animatronic parts expand with brutal force, impaling Afton from the inside. Crossbeams pierce through his chest. Sharp edges cut into his limbs. The endoskeleton head presses against his skull. Blood fills the suit, mixes with the mechanics, stains the yellow fabric dark. William Afton, the murderer, the monster, dies inside Spring Bonnie. Slowly, agonizingly, trapped in a position where he can't even collapse, the suit holding his body upright as life drains out of him. The children's spirits watch. Whether they caused the rain, whether they knew this would happen, we don't know. But they witness his death, and then they fade, moving on or returning to their animatronics, leaving William Afton to rot inside his costume. The safe room is sealed, boarded up, erased from records. The pizzeria is eventually abandoned entirely, and William Afton, dead but somehow still conscious, rots inside the Spring Bonnie suit for 30 years. 30 years of darkness, 30 years of decay. The suit deteriorating around his corpse, his body mummifying inside the metal and fabric, his consciousness trapped in a hell of his own making. This is how Spring Bonnie becomes Springtrap. Not a transformation, exactly. More like a merging. The suit and the corpse become one entity, neither fully machine nor fully human, something in between, something wrong. The tragedy of Spring Bonnie, if we can call it tragedy, is that this character was innocent once. Before William Afton used him, before the murders, Spring Bonnie was just a mascot, a fun character for a family restaurant. He had value, had purpose, brought happiness to children who didn't know any better. And then Afton took that innocence and used it as camouflage for evil. Spring Bonnie became synonymous with death, his yellow form forever associated with the worst acts of cruelty. Even before the Springlock failure, even before Springtrap, Spring Bonnie was already corrupted, already ruined by what Afton did while wearing his shell. The FNAF movie, released in 2023, makes this connection explicit. William Afton wears the Spring Bonnie suit for his murders in the film, and at the end, when the children's spirits turn against him, Mr. Cupcake bites through the suit, triggering the spring locks. We watch as Afton is crushed inside Spring Bonnie, the suit tearing into him, his screams muffled by the metal. And then the suit's eyes flicker on, glowing with new life, implying that Afton's consciousness is already beginning to merge with the animatronic, that Springtrap is being born even as Afton dies. The movie's final scene shows Afton's hand reaching out from inside the suit, not dead, not yet, but transformed, trapped, becoming something else. And Afton says his iconic line, the phrase that defines his character across all media: "I always come back." It's a promise and a curse. William Afton comes back as Springtrap. Spring Bonnie's legacy is to be the suit that couldn't kill Afton permanently, the vessel that allowed him to persist beyond death, to continue being a threat, to haunt the franchise for game after game after game. Spring Bonnie represents the corruption of innocence, the weaponization of trust. He's the tool that became a tomb, that became a body. He's evidence that some things, once corrupted, can never be fully clean again. You can't separate Spring Bonnie from William Afton anymore. The character and the killer are fused, literally and metaphorically, bound together by spring locks and suffering and 30 years of rot in a sealed room. And that fusion gave us one of the most terrifying characters in the entire Five Nights at Freddy's franchise, a character we'll discuss in depth right now. Springtrap, the man who always comes back. Springtrap is not just an animatronic. He's not just a corpse inside a suit. He's the physical manifestation of William Afton's refusal to die, his absolute rejection of justice or peace or any kind of ending. Springtrap is persistence given form, the proof that some evils can't be killed, can only be endured and fought, and maybe, eventually, laid to rest through extraordinary effort. When Springtrap appears in Five Nights at Freddy's 3, set 30 years after the sealing of the safe room, he's no longer recognizably Spring Bonnie. The yellow fabric has turned a sickly green olive color, stained with age and fluids we don't want to think about too hard. The suite is torn everywhere, massive gaping holes exposing not just the endoskeleton beneath, but pieces of the corpse inside. Wires dangle from wounds. Metal components poke through rotted fabric. The entire structure looks like it should collapse, like it's held together by nothing but spite. Springtrap's head is particularly disturbing. A large portion of the right ear is missing, just a stump with wires sticking out. The face has holes revealing the skull beneath, and in those holes you can see mummified tissue, the actual remains of William Afton still present inside the suit. The eyes are a pale grey, almost colourless, with the pupils visible but dim. Sometimes they seem yellow, probably just the lighting, but that yellow tint makes them look feverish, infected. His hands are skeletal, more bone than anything else, with some fingers missing or damaged. His legs are stripped from the mid-shin down, completely exposing the metal endoskeleton. He's falling apart, literally decomposing while still moving, still active, still hunting. The lore of FNAF 3 explains that Fazbear's Fright, a horror attraction based on the legendary hauntings of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, was opened years after the last pizzeria closed. The people running the attraction wanted authenticity, wanted real artifacts from the original locations to make their scare experience more legitimate. So they searched the old buildings, and in one of the sealed safe rooms, they found Springtrap. They didn't know what he was. They didn't understand that this wasn't just a costume, that there was a corpse inside, that the animatronic was possessed by one of the most dangerous men in the franchise's history. They just saw an old damaged animatronic, perfect for their horror attraction. So they brought Springtrap to Fazbear's Fright and put him on display. Big mistake. At night, Springtrap wakes up. Or rather, William Afton's consciousness, bound to the animatronic through 30 years of stewing in his own death, activates, and he begins to hunt. Springtrap's behavior in FNAF 3 is different from other animatronics in the series. He's more intelligent, more deliberate. He doesn't just follow programming or respond to stimuli. He stalks, he plans. He hides in the darkness of rooms, peeking around corners, waiting for the right moment to attack. He climbs through the vents, taking paths that require problem solving. He can be lured with audio, a recording of a child's laughter that draws him away from your office. But he learns. After a while, he figures out the trick and stops falling for it as easily. This intelligence is William Afton shining through. Unlike the child spirits possessing the other animatronics, confused and operating on instinct, Afton retains his full consciousness inside Springtrap. He knows where he is. He knows what he's doing. He's not just trying to stuff you in a suit, because that's what his programming tells him to do. He's trying to kill you because that's what William Afton does. He's a murderer, and being dead hasn't changed that fundamental aspect of his nature. Throughout FNAF 3, you experience not just Springtrap's attacks, but also hallucinations, the phantom animatronics that appear and cause system failures. These phantoms look burnt, damaged, and they seem to be connected to Springtrap somehow. Some theories suggest Afton is generating them, using his supernatural abilities to create psychological warfare. Others think they're independent hauntings, spirits drawn to the horror attraction. Either way, they make Springtrap more dangerous by disrupting your ability to track him. Springtrap's jump scare is uniquely terrifying. When he gets you, he doesn't just lunge at the camera like most animatronics. He takes his time. He leans in slowly, that eyeless, rotted face filling your vision, and you can see details you didn't want to see. The corpse, the decay, the wrongness. And then he attacks, and the game ends. But here's what makes Springtrap truly special as a character. He survives. At the end of FNAF 3, Fazbear's fright burns to the ground. The building is destroyed, consumed by fire, presumably taking Springtrap with it. But if you brighten the newspaper image that appears after completing Nightmare Mode, you can see Springtrap's head in the ruins, his eyes still glowing. He survived, because William Afton always comes back. This becomes his defining trait across the rest of the franchise. In Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator, Springtrap returns in a new form called Scraptrap, having apparently rebuilt himself with parts from a different Spring Bonnie suit. He looks different, more skeletal, but it's still him, still Afton, still refusing to die. Henry Emily, Afton's former business partner, lures all the haunted animatronics to a fake pizzeria and burns them again, trapping himself inside to ensure they're destroyed. And this time, it seems to work. The spirits are freed, the animatronics are destroyed. But Afton's consciousness persists, trapped in a nightmare state, tormented by the spirit of one of his victims in what becomes ultimate custom night. Or maybe that's purgatory. Or maybe it's something else. The details are unclear, but what's certain is that William Afton, even when his physical form is destroyed, continues to exist in some capacity. And then he comes back again. In Help Wanted, Afton's consciousness becomes Glitchtrap, a digital entity created when old circuit boards from Springtrap were scanned into a VR game. And in Security Breach, he appears as Burntrap, yet another physical form, rebuilt using Glamrock animatronic parts, still trying to continue his work. Springtrap is the first step in this cycle of returns. He's proof that William Afton found a way to cheat death, to persist beyond the point where any normal person would have ceased to exist. The springlock failure that should have killed him instead trapped him in a state between life and death, his consciousness bound to the animatronic through mechanisms we don't fully understand, but that involve remnant, agony, and sheer force of will. Thematically, Springtrap represents consequence. William Afton used Spring Bonnie to commit his murders, used the friendly image of the yellow rabbit to lure children to their deaths. And now he's trapped inside that same rabbit, forced to exist as the thing he corrupted, unable to escape the costume that became his tool and ultimately his tomb. It's poetic justice, the killer trapped inside the disguise he used for killing. But it's also terrifying because it means Afton can't be stopped. You can't kill someone who's already dead. You can't destroy something that keeps rebuilding itself. Springtrap represents the ultimate evil, the kind that persists no matter what you do, that survives every attempt to end it, that comes back again and again and again. The community has mixed feelings about this. On one hand, Springtrap is an iconic character, beloved for his design and his lore significance. The damaged Spring Bonnie sweat with the corpse visible inside is striking, memorable, the kind of visual that sticks with you. On the other hand, the constant returns of William Afton, his refusal to stay dead, has become a point of frustration for some fans who want the story to move on, to leave Afton behind and explore new threats. But that's the point, isn't it? Afton is supposed to be frustrating. He's supposed to overstay his welcome. Because that's what trauma does. It doesn't go away when you want it to. It lingers. It comes back. It finds new forms. The victims of Fazbear Entertainment, the children who died, they can eventually find peace and move on. But William Afton, the cause of their suffering, he doesn't get peace. He doesn't move on. He's cursed to keep existing, to keep suffering, and to keep causing suffering in turn. Springtrap in all his forms, from the original FNAF 3 version to Scraptrap to Burntrap, represents that cycle. As long as the pain he caused exists, as long as the consequences of his actions persist, Afton persists too, trapped in a hell of his own making, but too stubborn or too evil to let it end. And that's why, when Springtrap lunges at you in that jump scare, when his face fills the screen and you see the corpse and the machine merged into one nightmare, it's not just scary, it's a reminder. Evil doesn't die easily. Some things, once they exist, can't be fully erased. They can only be fought, contained, kept at bay through constant vigilance and sacrifice. Springtrap is William Afton's legacy. Not his business ventures, not his innovations in animatronics, but this, a rotting corpse trapped in a rabbit suit, forever hunting, forever causing pain, forever refusing to let go. It's what he earned. It's what he deserves. And it's what makes him one of the most compelling villains in horror gaming history. Nightmare Bonnie. Fear made manifest. In the realm of nightmares, where reality bends and childhood terrors take physical form, there exists a version of Bonnie so disturbing, so far removed from anything approaching innocence or entertainment value, that he exists solely to embody fear. This is Nightmare Bonnie, and he's exactly what his name suggests, a nightmare. Five Nights at Freddy's 4 takes a different approach from the previous games. Instead of being a night guard in a pizzeria, you play as a child in their bedroom, experiencing what appear to be nightmare versions of the animatronics that haunt Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. The exact nature of these nightmares remains one of the most debated topics in FNAF lore. Based on evidence from later games, particularly the survival logbook and certain details in Sister Location, some interpret these as experiments William Afton conducted in underground facilities, possibly involving fear-inducing gas and prolonged psychological torture. Others view them as genuine nightmares of the crying child from the minigames, reliving his trauma night after night. A third interpretation suggests these could be Michael Afton's guilt-driven nightmares after causing his brother's death. The ambiguity is intentional, and the game doesn't provide a definitive answer. What is clear is that Nightmare Bonnie is designed to be as frightening as possible. All of the unnerving qualities of the original Bonnie amplified and corrupted into something that barely resembles a children's entertainer. Nightmare Bonnie retains the basic shape of the original. He's recognizably a rabbit animatronic with the guitar and the basic proportions. But every detail has been twisted into something horrifying. His body is tattered and torn, much like Withered Bonnie but worse, with his endoskeleton visible through massive holes in the suit. Sharp, jagged metal edges poke out everywhere, threatening to cut anyone who gets too close. But it's the head and mouth that really sell the horror. Nightmare Bonnie has 4 rows of teeth, not just the normal dental arrangement of an animatronic. 4 complete rows of sharp, needle-like teeth that fill his mouth entirely, creating the impression that if he bites you, there's no escaping, no gaps in the jaws where you might pull free, just teeth everywhere, designed to tear and destroy. His face is stretched and twisted, almost melting in appearance. His eyes glow red in the darkness, bright and malevolent. His fingers end in sharp points, almost claw-like, suitable for tearing and ripping. And most disturbingly, his chest cavity is partially open, exposing a dark void inside where you can see more endoskeleton components, creating the impression that Nightmare Bonnie could swallow you whole, pull you into that chest cavity and consume you. In gameplay, Nightmare Bonnie approaches from the left side of the house, just like the original Bonnie attacked from the left in the first game. You have to listen carefully for his footsteps, check the hallway with your flashlight to see if he's approaching, and close the door before he reaches your room. If you're not fast enough, if you don't hear him coming, Nightmare Bonnie will enter your bedroom, and at that point, you're done. His jump scare is one of the most intense in the series, his entire form lunging at you with that mouth full of teeth wide open, the sound of his roar mixed with the screams of presumably his victim. Nightmare Bonnie represents fear in its purest form, not the fear of being hurt or killed, though that's part of it, but the fear children feel toward things they don't understand, toward figures that are supposed to be friendly, but that their instincts tell them are wrong. He's the personification of a child's fear of animatronics, of mascots, of characters that smile with too many teeth and watch with too bright eyes. The symbolic significance of Nightmare Bonnie in the broader FNAF narrative connects to themes of guilt and punishment that run through the series. If we interpret these as Michael Afton's nightmares, which some evidence in the survival logbook suggests, then Nightmare Bonnie could represent Michael's guilt over his brother's death. Michael pushed his younger brother into Fredbear's mouth as a prank, and the animatronic's jaws closed, causing the bite of 83 that killed the child. Nightmare Bonnie's emphasis on teeth, his multiple rows of sharp fangs, his mouth as a primary weapon, could reflect Michael's subconscious fixation on what happened to his brother. Alternatively, if these represent actual experiments conducted by William Afton, as some interpret from clues in Sister Location and the novels, then Nightmare Bonnie would be an externally imposed terror designed to test the limits of fear and psychological endurance. Either way, Nightmare Bonnie serves a purpose beyond just being a gameplay challenge. He's an exploration of fear itself, of what makes something scary, of how childhood anxieties about seemingly innocent things can be twisted into genuine horror. He takes the already unsettling original Bonnie and asks, what if we removed all restraint? What if we made him look the way he feels to someone who's genuinely afraid? The answer is Nightmare Bonnie, a creature that wouldn't be allowed in any actual children's establishment, that exists only in nightmares or in the fever dreams of trauma victims. He's proof that sometimes the scariest version of something isn't the realistic version, but the version filtered through fear and memory and guilt. In terms of the Bonnie lineage, Nightmare Bonnie is an outlier. He doesn't fit neatly into the timeline the way classic Bonnie, Withered Bonnie, and the others do. He exists in a space adjacent to the main narrative, in the realm of nightmares, where logic doesn't apply and symbolism reigns supreme. But he's important because he shows us what Bonnie represents at his core. Not just an animatronic, not just a character, but an idea. The idea of false friendliness. The idea of something that should be safe but isn't. The idea that the things meant to entertain children can become the things that haunt them. Nightmare Bonnie doesn't have much lore beyond his appearance in FNAF 4. He doesn't speak, doesn't have personality, doesn't even really have a defined origin beyond nightmare or fear experiment. But he doesn't need more. His design says everything. He's what happens when you strip away all the pretense, all the explanations, and just show fear in its most direct form. And it's effective. Players consistently rank Nightmare Bonnie among the scariest animatronics in the series. Not because of his lore, not because of who he represents, but because of how he looks and behaves. He's a pure horror element, undiluted by the complex narrative that surrounds most FNAF characters. In a series where most characters have layers, where you can feel sympathy for the spirits inside the machines, or at least understand their motivations, Nightmare Bonnie is simple. He's there to scare you. That's his entire purpose. And in that simplicity, he's devastatingly effective. Rockstar Bonnie and the Carnival of Variants. As the Five Nights at Freddy's series progressed, particularly with Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator and Ultimate Custom Night, Scott Cawthon began introducing variants of the classic characters, alternate versions with different themes and mechanics. For Bonnie, this meant the appearance of Rockstar Bonnie and several other colourful iterations that expanded the character's presence across the franchise. Rockstar Bonnie appears in Pizzeria Simulator as part of a new wave of animatronics available for purchase in your expanding restaurant. He's designed with a rockstar aesthetic, more elaborate than the original Bonnie's simple guitarist look. He wears a red and blue colour scheme with a prominent star on his chest, carries a guitar just like the classic version, and has a showier personality befitting his rockstar theme. In Ultimate Custom Night, Rockstar Bonnie becomes an active antagonist with a unique mechanic that sets him apart from other Bonnie variants. Periodically, he'll appear in your office and demand that you find his guitar. You have to click on the correct thing, usually actually clicking on his guitar, to appease him. If you do it correctly, he leaves peacefully. If you get it wrong, or if you take too long, he attacks. This mechanic is interesting because it makes Rockstar Bonnie less about evasion and more about quick reflexes and attention. He's testing your ability to focus under pressure, to quickly identify what he wants and give it to him. It's a different kind of threat compared to the stalking danger of other Bonnie variants. Rockstar Bonnie's personality, as expressed through his voice lines, is demanding and impatient. He knows he's a star, knows his guitar is important, and he expects you to help him retrieve it. There's an entitled quality to him, a performer who's used to getting what he wants. But there's also something almost comedic about his appearances. The absurdity of a rockstar rabbit demanding you find his instrument while you're trying to survive a night shift. Beyond Rockstar Bonnie, the franchise introduced several other Bonnie variants, particularly in the mobile game FNAF AR, Special Delivery. Chocolate Bonnie appeared as an Easter seasonal variant, covered in brown colouring with bite marks taken out of his ears and body, carrying an Easter basket instead of a guitar. The design is playful, leaning into the holiday theme while maintaining the slightly disturbing quality all FNAF characters possess. There are also various skins and variants in FNAF World, Help Wanted, and other spin-off games. Each of these versions adds something to the character's overall presence in the franchise. Some are purely cosmetic differences, holiday-themed reskins that don't carry significant lore weight. Others, like Rockstar Bonnie, have unique mechanics and personality traits that make them distinct characters in their own right. The proliferation of Bonnie variants serves several purposes. From a gameplay perspective, it keeps the character fresh, introduces new challenges, and appeals to completionist players who want to collect every version. From a lore perspective, it shows how Fazbear Entertainment kept trying to rebrand, to create new versions of their characters, to distance themselves from the tragedies while still capitalizing on the recognition these names carried. But there's something sad about it too. Every new Bonnie variant is another attempt to recapture whatever magic the original was supposed to have, another effort to make children happy with animatronic entertainment. And every single one is still haunted by the legacy of what came before, still associated with a franchise built on murder and suffering. Rockstar Bonnie, Chocolate Bonnie, all the various holiday and special edition Bonnies, they're like echoes of an idea that can never be fully clean again. Fazbear Entertainment can create as many variants as they want, can theme them around holidays and music genres, and whatever else they think will sell, but they can't escape the blood in the foundation. These variants are less explored in the lore community because they don't carry the same weight as Classic Bonnie or Withered Bonnie or even Springtrap. They're side characters, interesting for their mechanics or their designs, but not central to understanding the story. However, they're important for understanding the scope of Bonnie as a concept within the franchise. Bonnie isn't just one character. He's an archetype, a template that can be modified and reinterpreted endlessly. The blue rabbit with the guitar has become so iconic that you can slap a new paint job on him, change his accessories, alter his theme, and players immediately recognize what you're working with. That's the mark of a truly memorable character design, one that transcends any individual incarnation. So while we won't spend as much time on Rockstar Bonnie and the other variants as we have on the main timeline versions, they deserve acknowledgement. They're part of Bonnie's legacy, part of the character's evolution across the franchise. They show that even when Scott Cawthon and the FNAF team wanted to create something new, they kept coming back to Bonnie, kept finding new ways to use this character, kept him relevant across game after game. And that relevance leads us to one of the most interesting and mysterious Bonnie variants of all, one that technically appears in the modern era of the franchise, but whose absence speaks louder than most characters' presence. Glamrock Bonnie, the melody that went silent. In the most recent era of Five Nights at Freddy's, in the massive Freddy Fazbear's Mega Pizzaplex that serves as the setting for Security Breach, there should be a Bonnie. In fact, there was a Bonnie. But by the time the player arrives as Gregory, Bonnie is gone, and his absence is one of the most compelling mysteries in the entire game. Glamrock Bonnie was a member of the Glamrock Band, the modern iteration of the classic animatronics designed for the Mega Pizzaplex. He was the bassist, playing alongside Glamrock Freddy, Glamrock Chica, and originally sharing the stage with the band before being replaced. His design, based on what we can see from promotional materials and in-game appearances in the Ruin DLC, featured a light blue color scheme, a red jumpsuit with a yellow star on the chest, purple lightning bolt patterns on the sides, blue leg warmers, gloves, a headband, and spiked bracelets similar to Glamrock Freddy's. He had a whole attraction themed around him, Bonnie Bowl, a 1950s themed bowling alley within the Pizzaplex. The aesthetic was retro, nostalgic, different from the other attractions, but fitting for a character who was supposed to be a beloved member of the band. But Glamrock Bonnie is decommissioned before the events of Security Breach. He's gone, and nobody in the Pizzaplex wants to talk about what happened. The first hint of his absence comes early in the game. When Gregory sees Vanny, the security guard working for William Afton's digital consciousness, Glamrock Freddy remarks that the Pizzaplex used to have a rabbit. His tone is melancholic, suggesting loss. Later, if Gregory brings Freddy to a small curtain stage in Bonnie Bowl, similar to Pirate Cove from the original game, Freddy will say that he doesn't come there anymore because he misses Bonnie too much. This is important. Glamrock Freddy, the only animatronic in the Pizzaplex who isn't corrupted, who remains helpful and kind, specifically misses Bonnie. In one of the rooms accessible through secrets, there's a poster showing Freddy and Bonnie together, with Bonnie's handwriting on it saying, "You and me forever and ever. Love, Bonnie." They both wear matching star earrings in this image. The implication is clear. Freddy and Bonnie were close, best friends at minimum, and possibly something more in terms of their bond. So what happened? Security messages found on the FazWatch provide concrete facts. One message states, "Security report, 12:24 a.m. Bonnie is seen leaving his green room in Rockstar Row, heading east towards the atrium. 2:40 a.m. Bonnie enters the East Arcade. 4:12 a.m. Bonnie enters Monty Golf." This is the last confirmed sighting of Glamrock Bonnie before his decommissioning. Monty Golf is Montgomery Gator's attraction. Monty is the alligator animatronic who replaced Bonnie as the bassist in the Glamrock band. What happened after Bonnie entered Monty Golf is not explicitly shown in the game, but evidence throughout Security Breach and its DLC has led to widespread community interpretation. Monty is characterized throughout Security Breach as aggressive and destructive. He's prone to violent outbursts, smashing things, displaying far more aggression than the other animatronics. Security messages note that Monty's behavior has become increasingly destructive and requires monitoring. He's also the only Glamrock animatronic with claws, sharp metal claws on his hands, that were specifically added after Bonnie's decommissioning to help him play bass guitar. The prevailing theory in the community, supported by circumstantial evidence, suggests that Monty may have attacked Glamrock Bonnie, either out of jealousy for his position or due to some other motivation. Evidence cited includes claw marks found in various locations, the fact that Bonnie was last seen entering Monty's territory, and a scene in the Monty's Gator Golf arcade game that shows Monty as the star of the band, with Freddy thrown in a dumpster, implying Monty's ambitions extend beyond his original role. However, the game never explicitly confirms this scenario. In the Ruin DLC for Security Breach, we finally get to see Glamrock Bonnie's fate. If you deactivate all the wet floor signbots scattered throughout the Pizzaplex, a secret room opens behind Bonnie Bowl. Inside, surrounded by those deactivated bots, is Glamrock Bonnie's body. Glamrock Bonnie is severely damaged. His body has massive holes in the chest and torso exposing his endoskeleton. His head is damaged, his limbs bent and broken. There are scratches across his body, with what appears to be green coloring in some of the damaged areas, which matches Monty's paint scheme. This evidence has strengthened the theory of Monty's involvement, though it's worth noting the game never shows us exactly what happened. When all the wet floor signbots are deactivated, Bonnie's eyes, which were glowing yellow, stop glowing, suggesting some kind of connection between the bots and his remains. The save data for Ruin tracks these bots as collected caution bot souls, which suggests either the bots themselves have some spiritual significance, or that something supernatural connects to Glamrock Bonnie's destroyed form. The exact nature of this connection remains open to interpretation. This discovery raises several questions. First, it confirms that something violent happened to Bonnie, something that destroyed him beyond any hope of repair as far as the Pizzaplex management was concerned. Second, the hidden nature of his body suggests this wasn't a simple accident that was openly reported, but rather something that was covered up, with his remains concealed where most people wouldn't find them. Third, the supernatural elements with the wet floor sign bots imply his story extends beyond simple mechanical destruction. Some in the community have theorized that Vanny, William Afton's follower, might have used parts from Glamrock Bonnie to construct Springtrap, the new physical form for Afton's consciousness shown in Security Breach's true ending. This theory points to how Springtrap has complete arms, where his previous form Scraptrap was missing a limb, and how Springtrap utilizes Glamrock endoskeleton components. However, this remains speculative, as the game doesn't explicitly connect Glamrock Bonnie to Springtrap's construction. What we can confirm is that Glamrock Bonnie was destroyed, hidden away, and something supernatural appears to connect to his remains. This discovery raises several questions. First, it confirms that something violent happened to Bonnie, something that destroyed him beyond any hope of repair, as far as the Pizzaplex management was concerned. Second, the hidden nature of his body suggests this wasn't a simple accident that was openly reported, but rather something that was covered up, with his remains concealed where most people wouldn't find them. Third, the supernatural elements with the wet floor sign bots imply his story extends beyond simple mechanical destruction. The gondola Ride in Ruins Monty Golf section presents a sanitized version of events through cardboard cutouts, showing Bonnie appearing to willingly hand his guitar to Monty in what looks like a friendly passing of the torch. This officially sanctioned narrative contrasts sharply with the physical evidence of Glamrock Bonnie's destroyed body, the green paint in his wounds, and the circumstances surrounding his last known location in Monty Golf. Some in the community have theorized that Vanny, William Afton's follower, might have used parts from Glamrock Bonnie to construct Springtrap, the new physical form for Afton's consciousness, shown in Security Breach's true ending. This theory points to how Springtrap has complete arms where his previous form, Scraptrap, was missing a limb, and how Springtrap utilizes Glamrock endoskeleton components. However, this remains speculative, as the game doesn't explicitly connect Glamrock Bonnie to Springtrap's construction. What we can confirm is that Glamrock Bonnie was destroyed, hidden away, and something supernatural appears to connect to his remains. Glamrock Bonnie represents something the franchise hadn't really done before, the death of a main character, a real death, not a possession or a transformation, but an ending. Bonnie has been in every major FNAF game in some form, from the original to FNAF 2, to FNAF 3, to FNAF 4 and beyond. Even when he's not the main focus, even when he's a withered husk or a nightmare or a side variant, Bonnie is there. But in Security Breach, he's gone. The Glamrock band performs without him. The Pizzaplex continues to operate with Monty in his place. And aside from Freddy's grief and some hidden messages, nobody talks about Bonnie. Staff messages even note that kids keep asking where Bonnie is, that management considered re-theming Bonnie Bowl entirely because children won't stop asking about the missing rabbit. This absence is more powerful than presence could be. It's a hole in the expected pattern, a void where a beloved character should be. And for players who have followed Bonnie through every iteration, who have seen him as classic and withered and toy and shadow and nightmare and spring Bonnie and Springtrap and rockstar. The absence of Glamrock Bonnie in the actual gameplay of Security Breach is jarring. It's also thematically appropriate. Security Breach is about Gregory, a child navigating a dangerous place while being hunted by corrupted animatronics. He's helped by Glamrock Freddy, the only one not affected by the corruption. And part of Freddy's motivation might be related to Bonnie's loss. He failed to protect his best friend. He couldn't stop what happened to Bonnie. So he's going to protect Gregory. He's going to make sure this child survives where Bonnie didn't. The mystery of Glamrock Bonnie has captivated the community in ways that straightforward appearances sometimes don't. There's something compelling about a character who exists primarily through absence, through the grief of others, through clues and implications, rather than direct presence. Glamrock Bonnie in death is more interesting than some animatronics are in life, and the possibility that his story isn't over, that the glowing eyes and the connection to the wet floor signbots and the hidden room in ruin all suggest something supernatural still happening, means that Glamrock Bonnie might return in future content. Not physically repaired, probably, but maybe as a spirit, maybe as a guide, maybe as another form of the same character who has existed in so many forms already. For now, Glamrock Bonnie is a loss, a gap, a reminder that in the FNAF universe, nothing lasts forever, not even characters who seem integral to the franchise's identity. But if there's one thing we've learned from Bonnie's history, from his many incarnations and transformations, it's that absence doesn't always mean gone. Sometimes it just means waiting, waiting for the right moment to return. After all, Afton's line applies to more than just the villain. In Five Nights at Freddy's, everyone comes back eventually, even Bonnie. Bonnie across media. Beyond the games. While the games form the core of Bonnie's story, this character has appeared across multiple forms of media, each adding new dimensions or interpretations to what Bonnie represents. From books to movies to crossover games, Bonnie's reach extends far beyond Fazbear Entertainment's haunted pizzerias. In the FNAF novel trilogy, starting with The Silver Eyes, Bonnie appears both as an animatronic and as a concept woven into the darker elements of the story. The books present an alternate continuity, not exactly matching the games but parallel to them, exploring similar themes through different specific events. In The Silver Eyes, the original animatronics, including Bonnie, are depicted as more sympathetic, victims of William Afton's crimes, who are trying to protect children rather than harm them. It's a different take on the possession dynamic, suggesting that the spirits inside might not be as confused or aggressive as the game versions. The books also introduce the concept of the twisted animatronics, nightmare versions created through sound illusion technology that appear more monstrous than they actually are. While Bonnie himself isn't a twisted animatronic, the concept influences how we understand characters like Nightmare Bonnie, suggesting that maybe the nightmare versions aren't purely mental, but have some technological basis in Afton's experiments. In the Fazbear Frights short story collection, which exists in its own continuity, but provides insight into how the FNAF universe's supernatural mechanics work, Bonnie appears in various forms across different stories. These stories establish concepts like remnant and agony, spiritual substances that explain how the hauntings function. While Bonnie isn't the focus of these tales, the understanding they provide applies to his character, helping fans understand what it means for Jeremy's spirit to inhabit the animatronic. FNAF World presents a completely different take on Bonnie and all the characters. It's a cute RPG where the animatronics are playable heroes fighting against virus infections and glitches. Bonnie in FNAF World is adorable, colourful, just a fun character in a fun game with no horror elements. It's a fascinating contrast, seeing Bonnie the helpful party member compared to Bonnie, the nightmare stalking you through dark halls. This version of Bonnie reminds us that at their core, these characters were designed for children's entertainment. Bonnie was supposed to be fun. He was supposed to make kids smile. FNAF World shows us what he could have been if nothing had gone wrong, if no murders had occurred, if Fazbear Entertainment had remained innocent. In Help Wanted and Help Wanted 2, the VR games that explore Fazbear Entertainment trying to rebrand through virtual experiences, Bonnie appears in recreations of levels from the original games. You can interact with Bonnie in the parts and service level, performing maintenance on him, cleaning his eyes, fixing his guitar. It's intimate in an uncomfortable way, getting that close to a character who's supposed to be threatening. Help Wanted's lore suggests that old circuit boards from real animatronics were scanned into the VR game, creating digital versions of the characters, but also accidentally importing the hauntings and spiritual remnants attached to those boards. This means the Bonnie you interact with in Help Wanted might carry traces of the real Jeremy's spirit, or at least echoes of the original possessions. The digital realm doesn't free these characters from their past. It just gives the past a new medium to haunt. The Five Nights at Freddy's movie, released in 2023, features Bonnie as one of the main animatronic antagonists. Played practically with an actual suit rather than pure CGI, this Bonnie is notably blue, settling the colour debate definitively for the film universe. Movie Bonnie is possessed by one of William Afton's victims, same as the games, and participates in the hunt for Mike Schmidt and his companions. What's interesting about Movie Bonnie is how he moves. The practical effects give him a weight and presence that's different from the game's jump scares. He's slower, more deliberate, almost sad in his movements. There's a scene where the animatronics show Mike a memory, their deaths, and you see the moment Bonnie's victim was murdered. It humanizes the character, makes you feel the tragedy rather than just the threat. The movie's version of Spring Bonnie, worn by William Afton during the flashback murders and at the end during his Springlock death, is also significant. Matthew Lillard's performance as Afton, the calm menace before the Springlocks activate, and then the screaming agony as they crush him, creates one of the film's most memorable moments. The movie makes it visceral, makes you understand what the Springlock failure means in a way that the pixelated minigames couldn't fully convey. Afton's iconic line, "I always come back," delivered before the Springlocks crush him, promises his return as Springtrap in future installments. In the crossover with Dead by Daylight, the asymmetric horror multiplayer game, Springtrap was added as a playable killer in 2025. This marks Bonnie, or at least the Afton version, of Bonnie entering a completely different gaming franchise, bringing the FNAF horror to a new audience. Players can now stalk survivors as Springtrap, using abilities themed around Fazbear Entertainment mechanics. This crossover is significant because it validates FNAF's place in horror gaming history. Dead by Daylight only adds iconic horror characters, the most recognizable faces of fear across multiple media. Having Springtrap included alongside characters like Freddy Krueger, Michael Myers, and the Demogorgon confirms that William Afton in his Spring Bonnie suit has achieved legendary status in the horror genre. Across all these media, Bonnie maintains certain consistent traits. The guitar, when present, identifies him. The rabbit form is constant. The color, whether blue or purple depending on lighting, remains recognizable. And the association with tragedy, with lost innocence, with entertainment turned horror, persists regardless of the medium. But each adaptation also brings something new. The books add depth to the spirits and the possession mechanics. FNAF World shows the innocent version of what these characters could be. The VR games create new ways to interact with Bonnie, making him tangible in ways the original games couldn't. The movie makes him physical, real, something you can see moving in actual space with actual weight. Dead by Daylight makes him playable, lets you experience being the threat. Together, these various appearances create a fuller picture of Bonnie than any single version could provide. He's not just the blue animatronic from the first game. He's a concept that's been explored from every angle, that's been reimagined and reinterpreted, that's proven flexible enough to work in multiple contexts while maintaining his core identity. And through all of it, whether he's a cute party member in an RPG, a haunted animatronic in a VR experience, or a killer in a horror movie, Bonnie carries that legacy, the first character Scott Cawthon created, the one that scared him in his own nightmares, the one that doesn't follow the laws of physics, the musician who became a metaphor for lost innocence and the persistence of trauma, the legacy of a blue rabbit. We've traveled through more than a decade of Five Nights at Freddy's history, following Bonnie through every major incarnation, every transformation, every appearance from the show stage to the wreckage of the Mega Pizzaplex. It's time to step back and look at what this character represents, what he means to the franchise, and why he's remained relevant through so many games and so many changes. Bonnie is, in many ways, the heart of Five Nights at Freddy's. Not the face of the franchise, that's Freddy Fazbear, whose name is literally in the title, but the heart, the core of what makes these games work as horror. He was the first character designed, the one who set the template for how all the others would function. He established the pattern of friendly entertainment, transformed into lurking threat, of something that should be safe becoming the source of danger. Every version of Bonnie we've discussed carries a piece of this fundamental concept. Classic Bonnie shows us the basic idea, a children's performer who hunts at night. Withered Bonnie shows us decay, the visual representation of things falling apart while the horror persists. Toy Bonnie shows us that you can't escape the past through rebranding. Shadow Bonnie shows us the supernatural forces that exist beyond simple possession. Spring Bonnie and Springtrap show us how tools of joy can become instruments of death, and how consequences trap people in their own weapons. Nightmare Bonnie shows us fear stripped of context, pure terror. Glamrock Bonnie shows us loss, absence, the pain of something beloved being destroyed. Together, these versions create a character study that goes far deeper than most horror game antagonists ever achieve. We understand Bonnie not just as a threat, but as a tragedy, as a victim, as a symbol, as a consequence of terrible choices made by terrible people. The fact that Scott Cawthon chose Bonnie as his first design, that he found Bonnie the scariest animatronic even though he created him, tells us something important. There's something fundamentally unsettling about this character that transcends any individual design choice. The blue rabbit with the guitar speaks to primal fears, to the uncanny valley between friendly and frightening, to the childhood anxiety of mascots and characters that are almost but not quite right. Bonnie's lack of eyebrows in his original design contributes to this. Eyebrows convey emotion, help us read intentions. Without them, Bonnie's face is harder to pass, more alien, less human. His stare becomes more disturbing because we can't use the visual cues we're accustomed to relying on. This was true of classic Bonnie and remains true in various ways across his iterations. His movement patterns, particularly that supernatural teleportation and floating that Scott Cawthon confirmed are intentional, set him apart from more conventional enemies. Bonnie doesn't play by the rules. He breaks physics. He appears where he shouldn't. He forces players to adapt to unpredictability, and that unpredictability is scary in a way that mere aggression often isn't. The guitar is an interesting detail too. It's such a simple, innocent prop. Bonnie is a musician. He plays music for children. But that guitar becomes ominous in context, a reminder that he's not using it anymore, that his performance days are over, that the music has stopped, and all that remains is the hunting. When rockstar Bonnie demands you find his guitar, when Glamrock Bonnie's bass is mentioned in security logs, the instrument becomes a symbol of what was lost, what ended when the murders began and the hauntings started. In the FNAF community, Bonnie holds a special place. He's not always the most discussed character. That honor often goes to the more mysterious figures like Golden Freddy or the Puppet. He's not always considered the scariest, with Withered Bonnie being an exception, but he's loved. There's affection for Bonnie that goes beyond just appreciating a well-designed antagonist. Part of this is because Bonnie, particularly through Glamrock Freddy's grief in Security Breach, is characterized as a friend. He has relationships. He matters to other characters. Jeremy, the spirit inside classic Bonnie, is a victim, but also, presumably, a person who had a life, had family, had a future that was stolen. Glamrock Bonnie had Freddy, had a band, had a place in something bigger than himself. These connections make Bonnie feel more real, more worth caring about. The theories surrounding Bonnie, particularly the Glamrock Bonnie theories, show how invested the community is in this character. People want to know what happened. They want justice for Bonnie. They want him to come back, to have another chance. That emotional investment speaks to successful character design, to creating something people don't just fear, but actually care about. Looking at Bonnie's journey from a mechanical perspective, he's also been a testbed for new ideas, different AI behaviors, different movement patterns, different mechanics. Bonnie is often the first, almost aggressive, the one who tests players hardest, who requires them to master the game systems. From a game design standpoint, Bonnie is the benchmark. If you can handle Bonnie, you can handle anything the game throws at you. This makes him the teacher, in a way. Every FNAF player learns from Bonnie, learns to check cameras efficiently, learns to close doors at the right moment, learns to listen for audio cues, learns to manage multiple threats simultaneously. Bonnie is harsh, doesn't give you time to ease in, but that difficulty serves a purpose. It prepares you for what comes next. The sadness at the core of Bonnie's character arc, if we can call it that, is that he never gets a happy ending. Jeremy doesn't get to move on in most versions of the timeline. He's stuck, trapped, suffering. Even when the spirits are freed at the end of Pizzeria Simulator, we don't see Jeremy specifically. We see graves, we see silhouettes, but we don't get confirmation that he's at peace. And Glamrock Bonnie, the newest version, is destroyed, left in a hidden room, possibly with his spirit fragmented across wet floor signbots, unable to rest. There's no closure for Bonnie, and maybe that's intentional. Maybe Bonnie represents the idea that some tragedies don't get resolved, some stories don't have endings, some victims never receive justice or peace. That's dark, but it's honest in a way that a happier ending wouldn't be. For fans creating their own content, Bonnie is endlessly adaptable. Fan games feature Bonnie variants. Fan art reimagines him in countless styles. Fan theories pick apart every detail of his appearances, his lore, his connections to other characters. He's a canvas for creativity, a character strong enough to support reinterpretation while maintaining his core identity. The music of FNAF, the fan songs and official tracks that have become part of the franchise's cultural footprint, often feature Bonnie. It's Been So Long references the band. Die in a Fire focuses on William Afton, but mentions the animatronics. Salvaged from Pizzeria Simulator includes Scrap Baby's lines, but the animatronics are collectively present. In all these musical expressions of FNAF's story, Bonnie is there, part of the chorus of haunted machines demanding attention, demanding recognition. As the franchise moves forward, with new games inevitably on the horizon, Bonnie's role remains uncertain. Will Glamrock Bonnie return in some form? Will we see entirely new versions of the character, new designs, new mechanics? Or has Bonnie's story finally run its course, with his absence in Security Breach being a definitive ending? We don't know. But based on history, based on Bonnie's presence in every major game up until now, it seems likely he'll return. Different probably, changed, but still recognizably Bonnie. Still the blue rabbit, or the yellow rabbit, or the shadow rabbit, or whatever form the story requires. Still the guitarist, the friend, the victim, the hunter, because Bonnie, more than almost any other FNAF character, has proven he can be anything the franchise needs him to be. Scary or sad, aggressive or tragic, solid or incorporeal, present or absent. He's flexible, adaptable, enduring. He's survived everything the series has thrown at him and at us. From simple 2D images to 3D models to VR experiences, to practical movie effects to playable characters in multiple games. Through retcons and revelations, through timeline clarifications and lore dumps, through the expansion from indie game to multimedia franchise. Bonnie was there at the beginning, the first character created for Five Nights at Freddy's. And in every meaningful sense, he's still here now, woven so deeply into the franchise's fabric that you can't extract him without unraveling everything else. That's legacy. That's impact. That's what it means to be truly essential to a story. So whether you found Bonnie scary, whether he gave you nightmares like he gave Scott Cawthon nightmares, whether you felt sorry for Jeremy trapped in that shell, whether you mourned Glamrock Bonnie's death, whether you theorized about Shadow Bonnie's nature, whether you ran from Springtrap through Fazbear's fright, or whether you just appreciated a well-designed character who served his purpose across multiple games. Bonnie matters. To the franchise, to the community, to the story being told about innocence corrupted, about entertainment twisted into horror, about victims who can't rest and consequences that persist long after the crime. He's not just a blue rabbit with a guitar. He's a piece of gaming history, an icon of indie horror, a character who will be remembered and discussed for years to come. And that's the complete story of Bonnie, as complete as it can be anyway, with the franchise still growing and new revelations always possible. But this is where we are now. This is what we know. This is the legacy of the character that started it all. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the many forms and phases of Bonnie's existence in the Five Nights at Freddy's universe. If you enjoyed this deep exploration of one of horror gaming's most iconic characters, I'd appreciate if you'd like and subscribe to the channel. And let me know in the comments which version of Bonnie resonates most with you, which iteration you find most interesting, or what theories you have about his future in the franchise. Until next time, keep the lights on, watch your doors, and remember that some rabbits are more dangerous than they appear. Good night.